So this iPad has control over what's going to be checked, but I will touch this.
Just that.
Okay.
Sounds good. Let me go and check Keith's.
Okay. In terms of what's flashing on the screen, is it this exact thing? No, something. Yep. So I'm worried if I've been scrolling up and down, it's going to do it. Okay, back. Good. Okay. Yep. Wonderful.
This paragraph does justice.
Okay. And no password in case it. Okay. worst case scenario, to press on this one.
Mo hit.
Let's try it. Or it should stay. Yeah. Let's do it now.
いらないいらない。
That I did it before.
Okay, can we really open it? Open the door?
Thank you so much. Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, please note the emergency exits are illuminated by signs. The exit behind this stage is not in use. In the event of an emergency, please use the warrant available nearest emergency exit. Thank you.
Hi, Helen. Welcome. Good afternoon, Helen. Good to hear you, but it could be because
Same. Renzo. Yes. Yes, I know. I'm trying to recall where.
pleasure to meet you again.
Last week?
Good luck with the Planetary.
Where?
Where are you in Vietnam? No. Yeah, I'm trying to recall. Anyway, but lovely to meet you. Oh. Great. Well, find your seats. Yep. Kamusta? Okay ba? Nagbarong ako. Oo. Alam mo, may maganda rin akong batin. Kasi syempre, ang isa kong backup yun ay coke. Pero sabi ko, HSR Cape Town. That's 2014, October, September to October. And then, no, you know what? Now I remember. From Cape Town, I went straight to California for a meeting. That's how it's Oh, no, you're referring to Kolkata. The World Congress.
Somebody's.
Welcome, everyone. If you could please take a seat, we're about to begin.
Too early. Oh, too early. Oh, yeah. I consider it as a test run. So yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we should definitely take many pictures. How's Paula doing?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Konnichiwa, bonjour, assalamu alaikum, and all the greetings that are possible. Welcome. Welcome to Health Systems Research 2024. It is my great privilege and honor to welcome you. My name is Adnan Haider. I'm a professor of global health at George Washington University. But very importantly, I've been privileged and honored to be the chair of Health Systems Global for the past 2 years. And on behalf of the board, welcome to the biannual Health Systems Global Symposium 2024. I'm so delighted and happy to see you all today, but I'd like to make sure that we have people from around the world. If you are from the Pan American Health Organization, North or South American region, could I hear some noise? Okay, Paho is in the room. What about Afro? Is Afro in the room? The African regional? Whoa! Okay, what about Sierra? Is Sierra in the house? Okay, Afro is winning right now. What about Wipro? Anybody from Wipro? Okay, Wipro and Afro are in the running. What about European region? And finally, EMRO. Anybody from EMRO here? Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you that all regions of our world are represented. This is foundational and fundamental to what Health System Global represents. It is a diverse community with a central focus of promoting health policy and systems research. Let me begin with thanks. First of all, thanks to all members of our executive committee, the local organizing committee, the program working group, all our donors and supporters, our special partners at the Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research, all of our members, and all of you for being here today. Without you, there would be no symposium. And so you represent the strength, the energy, the force behind HPSR around the world. Thank you for what you do every day. Dear friends and colleagues, it is also important to acknowledge the context within which we live and operate. Let me share very quickly 3 or 4 important realities. First, for those of you who may recall, this is the 20th anniversary of something called the Mexico Summit on Health Research. That summit initiated a movement. That movement around health policy and systems research was owned by the Alliance, was owned by national governments, and actually led to the birth of Health Systems Global. So for those of you who are celebrating that 20 years, let us recognize many, many colleagues on whose shoulders we build our society today. Second, let us recognize Nagasaki. Nagasaki is a city that is not only important for Japan, but important for the world, because it teaches us a lesson of hope, resilience, and peace. And peace is badly needed in this world today. I also want to acknowledge the fact that many colleagues, many fellow citizens around this world are living in areas of conflict. They are living in extremely vulnerable situations. And some of them could not join us today because of the context within which they live. We acknowledge them, we recognize them, and we salute their resilience in the countries and context that they live and operate every day. But I'm also worried. I'm worried because our society and all of you who build on the work that evidence and science demonstrate is actually under threat. There are threats to science coming from governments, from societies. The era of misinformation and disinformation is upon us. And of course, there are many forces within governments around the world that will challenge us in the years to come. We must be strong. We must be resilient. We must be evidence-based in our approaches. But it is also my firm belief that if any society, if any community can be a beacon of hope, can be a beacon of support for colleagues around the world, it is this society. Each and every single one of you has the power to change. One person is enough. Many people can be overtaken, and therefore having this community, having this solidarity is incredibly important. And I especially want to call out to all the students who've joined us today. You are the future for tomorrow. You are the hope that we have for building a better world than, in fact, we are leaving for you. I hope that this conference will motivate you. I hope that it will allow your networks to grow, and I hope that Health Systems Global, in fact, will be the platform within which you can not only grow health policy and systems research, but also a more peaceful better, and equitable world. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege now to recognize our program working group that really does the hard work of building this symposium. And we are so fortunate in having Professor Steph Top lead that program working group. She's a member of our board, Professor of Global Health at James Cook University. Please welcome Dr. Steph Top.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Health systems have historically and are still too commonly framed as linear, imagined as straightforward pathways from input to output. But what unites everyone in this room is an appreciation of the complex, inherently political, and deeply human realities that underpin the systems that we work in, shape, study, and utilise every day. That willingness to engage with complexity and with the humanity that underpins it, and our efforts to make sense of it, are what makes this symposium and the community of researchers, policymakers, and advocates who attend this event so distinct from others on the international conference circuit. That willingness to engage with complexity and the humanity that underpins it are also once again strongly reflected in the 4 sub-themes we have for HSR 2024, which are a product of your ideas, canvassed for those who can cast that far back in late 2022 and early 2023 through several rounds of member survey and consultations. Those consultations highlighted the imperative of health systems that can meet the planetary health challenge, the urgency of addressing inequity through more just and inclusive systems, the long-standing challenge of reforming institutional frameworks and modes of governance to align with those aspirations of justice and inclusion, and the knowledge practices that inform it all. These themes are neither random nor selected by accident, and although diverse, they do not stand in isolation, reflecting 4 deeply interconnected strands of our work: existential, ethical, institutional, and epistemic, that are only enriched for our consideration of how they influence each other. As a product of your ideas and requests, these themes reflect a community of practice not only interested to share their own cutting-edge work, but hungry for the stimulation and motivation and fellowship arising from the powerful linkage of the research, advocacy, policy-making triangle, as well as for the provocation and catalytic potential of the radical reflexivity that comes when we challenge ourselves to think differently and do things differently. We, the Program Working Group, have tried to do justice and hold these ideas together over so many rounds of synthesis, review, and curation, and it's my immense pleasure to recognise the commitment and contribution of that group who has stewarded these ideas, your ideas, over the past 2 years into this exciting and hopefully provocative program. My Program Working Group co-chair, Professor Hiro Aiga, Professor Rima Afifi, Ms. Saida Makimoto, Professor Daniel Macera, Dr. Devaki Mnambia, Dr. Francisco Aveda, and Dr. Goran Zanga. Please put your hands together for this Program Working Group. And with that, it is my great pleasure to invite my co-chair, Professor Hiro Aiga, who is also the chair of the HSR 2024 Local Organising Committee and Professor at the School of Tropical Medicine and Global Health at Nagasaki University, to introduce the Local Organising Committee. Thank you, Hiro.
Thanks, Steph. Esteemed guests, distinguished colleague, all participants. On behalf of the Local Organizing Committee, it's my great pleasure to warmly welcome all of you to HSR 2024. I am very much delighted to introduce 10-member organization of local organizing committee who have worked tirelessly over the last 12 months to make this symposium a success. Japan Nagasaki University, Japan International Cooperation Agency, National Center for Global Health and Medicine, Nagasaki City Government, WHO Center for Health Development, Japan Center for International Exchange, Japan CSO Network on Global Health, Japan Association for Global Health, Nagasaki International Tourism and Convention Association, and Japan Representative Office Asian Development Bank. So please join me giving them a big hand. Now, it's my great honor to introduce Professor Keizo Takemi, the former Minister of Health, Labor, and Welfare of Japan, and the member of Japan's House of Councils. Professor Takemi is one of Japan's most globally influential political leader in health system policy. His contribution encompasses various international health initiatives, including Global Health Workforce Alliance, Prince Maheu Award Conference PMAC, and many others. During my time with Global Health Workforce Alliance, I personally received invaluable support from him. So I would like to take this opportunity to express my deepest gratitude to him once again. As many of you know, Professor Takemi also has been strongly supporting Takemi Program on International Health at Harvard School of Public Health. I'm sure many Takemi former fellows are with us here in this room. Professor Takemi's contribution and dedication to health research and policy and systems research are truly remarkable. He was very much looking forward to being with us in person. However, because of his urgent commitment and responsibility in National Diet of Japan, he is regrettably unable to attend. He has graciously prepared a video-recorded keynote speech for us, so it is our privilege to view it together now. Thank you very much for your attention.
The honorable guests, distinguished speakers, and esteemed colleagues. It's a great honor to welcome you all to the 2024 Health System Research Symposium. Unfortunately, due to my commitment in the diet and demands of my role, I am unable to be with you in Nagasaki today. Today, we gather under an important and timely theme: the building just and sustainable health systems, centering people and protecting the planet. We are facing a moment of great challenge in the world. The climate change, health threats, and shifting populations are having a profound effect on our healthcare system. These challenges require urgent action. Our health system, traditionally built to treat diseases, must now adapt to these new complex threats. These issues are interconnected, and they affect not only individual health, but the well-being of our planet. As we focus on building the health systems that are strong and are inclusive and sustainable, we must ensure that all the people, regardless of the background, have access to quality health care. At the same time, we must protect the health of the planet, as our future health depends on the health of the environment as well. In Japan, we have developed a strategy called the Future Health and Active Society Strategies. This strategy addresses the challenges of an aging population and declining the birth rates and the need to ensure the sustainability of our universal health insurance system. It also focuses on innovation and social progress in healthcare and caregiving and helping the people that live long, the healthy, and meaningful lives. Japan is also committed to supporting the global health, recognizing that the challenges we face are shared by all countries. This is why we are taking the several important steps. The first, building a global health innovation ecosystem. Japan is focused on creating an international environment where the medical research and healthcare innovation can thrive. We are working closely with other countries to advance the medical technologies and improve healthcare worldwide under the public and private collaboration. The second, the leading global infectious disease response. Japan is committed to playing a leading role in the global efforts to manage infectious diseases. Our experiences with the COVID-19 pandemic have strengthened our resolve to build a global health response system that is fast, effective, and prepared for the future threats. And third, the promoting a health and the care cycle in the Asia and Pacific. Japan is actively working with countries in Asia and Pacific region to improve healthcare systems and reduce the health disparities. This initiative will strengthen health systems in our region and promote the mutual growth. And fourth, establishing the UHC Knowledge Hub. Japan is working to establish an UHC, the Knowledge Hub in Tokyo, in collaboration with the WHO and the World Bank, to support the low and middle income countries in achieving universal health coverage through the strengthening the health financing capacity. This will be a global center for sharing knowledge and the best practices on the health care systems. Now, these efforts align closely with the themes of this symposium. First, the strengthening health systems for planetary health. Japan is focused on building health systems that are resilient to the challenges posed by the climate change and other global disruptions. The second, advancing the justice, inclusion, and belonging in health systems. We believe that the health systems must be inclusive, ensuring that no one is left behind. And we continue to promote the policies that support equity in healthcare. And third, health governance, the policies, and institutional frameworks for just and sustainable health systems. Japan is committed to working with international partners to improve health governance and policy frameworks and strengthening health systems globally. The fourth, the knowledge for just health systems. Sharing knowledge and best practice is the key to building fair and sustainable health systems, and Japan is working to facilitate this exchange through the Universal Health Coverage Knowledge Hub in collaboration with the WHO and the World Bank. In conclusion, I would like to express my deep appreciation to all of you for your participation. Over the coming days, let us work together to create health systems that are not only strong and resilient, but also just and sustainable. By centering the people and protecting the planet, we can build a healthier the future for all. Thank you.
Dear friends and colleagues, we must offer our thanks to Professor Takemi. First, because of the beautiful exposition that he has done of Japan's perspective on global health and how it merges with the themes of our conference. I thought that was wonderfully displayed by Professor Takemi. But secondly, for being who he is, an inspirational leader, a model for many of us to follow, a leader here in Japan, but also in global health, and one who's widely recognized. Please join me in thanking him once again. And now we'll make a transition. I'm going to invite Professor Steph Top once again to transition us to the opening plenary session. Steph, over to you.
Thanks, Adnan. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce the chair for Plenary 1, Dr. Chiho Watanabe. Dr. Watanabe is Professor of Planetary Health and the Executive Advisor to the President of Nagasaki University, and he will guide you on the rest of the plenary session going forward. Professor Watanabe.
Thank you, Steph. Good afternoon, everyone, and distinguished guests, delegates, and also super motivated young researchers and students. I need this one. Welcome, everyone, to this first plenary session for the 8th Global Symposium for Health Systems Research with the theme, Strengthening Health Systems for Planetary Health. We gather here today under the broader theme of building just and sustainable health systems, centering people and protecting the planet. And it is crucial to re-examine the health systems in view of planetary health, the intersection of health, justice, and planetary sustainability. My name is Chiho Watanabe, and I'm a professor of the Interfaculty Initiative in Planetary Health of Nagasaki University, and serving as the executive advisor to the president of Nagasaki University. Before taking a current position in 2021, I was president of the National Institute for Environmental Studies for 4 years and held a professorship in human ecology at the University of Tokyo. Currently, I'm an associate member of the Science Council of Japan and also working for various global initiatives like Planetary Health Alliance or Future Earth. A reminder that in this week, HSR plenary sessions, you will be invited to participate using the Slido app and the virtual participation tool. Please take a minute to download this app now, if you have not already, and connect via the QR code you see on the big screen. You can see it. Later in the session, we will also invite questions for the panel via this app. As we begin, I'd like to first briefly touch upon planetary health, a key word for this session and one of the 4 themes of the entire HSR conference. Although many of you are familiar with this term, the term came in the year of the 2015 in a publication on Lancet Journal, in which it was explained as the health of human civilization and the states of the natural systems. Since then, various important institutes and initiatives gave their own definitions, but all of which emphasizes the interdependence between nature and human society. This is a simple but very powerful message which we have been aware from ancient past, but somehow we gradually forget this message, resulting in so-called triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity, and pollution. To solve any of these issues, it has been argued that our society needs a comprehensive structural and institutional transformation. Health system is not an exception. It is also needs to change and transform itself, as we will discuss in this session. In this session, we would mainly focus on climate change, particularly emphasizing 3 points associated with such a transition in the health system field. They are justice, urgency, and science. The first one, justice, is the deep and intrinsic connection between climate justice and the health systems. The communities most vulnerable to the impact of climate change are often the same communities marginalized by health systems, experiencing inequitable access to care. Climate justice, therefore, is inseparable from health equity. If our health systems are to be truly just, they must be built to respond to climate impacts in ways that protect the most vulnerable. This requires rethinking not only health system structures, but also global governance mechanisms, which must center justice as a core principle. The second point, the urgency. Urgency is the urgency of the establishing health system leadership and adaptation. We have seen repeatedly that health systems are on the front line of responding to climate-related crises, from heat waves to vector-borne diseases. Yet, too often, our health system leaders are silent and the health system are unprepared, reacting with short-term measures rather than comprehensive structural change. This must shift. Third point, the critical role of research in supporting this agenda. The science of climate-resilient health system is still in its infancy, and there are significant gaps in our knowledge that must be addressed. We urgently need more research, particularly how health systems themselves can and should adapt and evolve in response. During this session, I encourage all of you to consider how each of these themes, climate justice, system adaptation, and the need for research, intersect with overarching goal of building health systems that are not only just, but also sustainable. Our speakers will offer valuable experiences and insights for this question, and I look forward to the rich discussion we are about to have on how we transform health systems incorporating the idea of planetary health. With that, let me introduce our outstanding speakers and panel moderator. Our first speaker, Helen Clarke, really needs no introduction to most of us. She served as a Prime Minister of New Zealand from 1999 to 2008 and was a member of the Parliament for 27 years. She then held 2 terms as Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, and served as the Chair of the United Nations Developing Group from 2009 to 2017. In July 2020, the Director General of the WHO appointed her as a co-chair of the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, and she also chairs the board of the Executive Industries Transparency Initiative, the Partnership of Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health, and other organizations and initiatives committed to public good, including the Alliance for Health Policy and System Research. Today, Helen will be joining us remotely. Welcome, Helen. Our second speaker is Ms. Shweta Narayan. Shweta Narayan is a campaign lead for the Global Climate and Health Alliance, a network of over 180 health organizations dedicated to exploring and addressing the connections between health and climate change. She leads campaigns on fossil fuels, air pollution, climate justice, and health equity, aiming to foster a global dialogue among leading health professional networks. Academic institutions, think tanks, public health experts, and environmental and climate movements to strengthen advocacy on climate and health issues. Shweta has more than 2 decades of experience in advocacy and community organizing for environmental justice, and collaborates with state and local governments in India to integrate health professionals' perspectives into the development of climate and environmental health policies. Our third speaker, Susannah Mayhew, is Professor of Health Policy, Systems, and Reproductive Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Susanna is a former center director and head of department and current climate lead at the London School Center for the Maternal, Adolescent, Reproductive, and Child Health. She works in partnership with a variety of institutions to conduct research on reproductive health and rights, health policy, systems, and systems integration research, and community engagement in crisis response, including climate change and infectious disease outbreaks. Susanna has led numerous multi-partner research projects over the past 20 years and currently works primarily in West and East Africa, where she is conducting research on cross-sectoral responses to climate and health challenges. And finally, it's my pleasure to also introduce our panel moderator for this evening, Associate Professor Renzo Guinto. Renzo is Associate Professor of the Global and Planetary Health of the Shin Health Duke NUS Global Health Institute at the Duke NUS Medical School, National University of Singapore. Previously, he was Associate Professor and Director of the Planetary and Global Health Program, St. Luke's Medical Center College of Medicine in the Philippines. Renzo is currently a member of the National Panel of the Technical Expert of the Philippine Climate Change Commission, a member of the WHO Technical Advisory Group on the Ethics of the Climate and Health, and convener of Planetary Health Philippines. And so, without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker joining us online, the Right Honorable Helen Clarke.
Konnichiwa and good morning, and thank you to the organizers from Health Systems Global and Nagasaki University for inviting me to address you today. I very much regret that because of family circumstances, I cannot be with you in person. Our theme today, how health systems can be strengthened for planetary health, is timely, not just because the annual United Nations Conference of Parties to the Framework Convention on Climate Change is ongoing in Azerbaijan, but also because climate change is an existential threat to humanity. So I'm delighted to speak to this community on such an important issue for me personally and for the Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research, which I chair. So let me make 3 points. The first, and I will be blunt, global and national governments are failing to address climate change and its threats to planetary health adequately. We have had breakthroughs at the global level, as with the Paris Agreement of 2015, but these are then followed by years of argument about how to implement, including how to finance, and with too little action at the national level. Of course, the scale of the climate change challenge is very well known. People around the world are facing record-breaking threats to their well-being and survival. And far from declining, greenhouse gas emissions reached an all-time high last year. The world just isn't on track to meet the Paris Agreement's targets. In fact, the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, which countries agreed to try to stay below, was already breached in the 12 months from February 2023 to January 2024. The World Health Organization has called climate change the greatest public health threat of the 21st century. And the evidence continues to mount on how human health is being undermined. The Lancet Countdown reports each year are documenting that so thoroughly. These impacts come at a time when hard-won gains in global health are also under pressure from the COVID-19 pandemic and its very long tail, and from the many conflicts around the world. The pandemic pushed so many more people into poverty and more governments into much more debt. And the conflicts have had spillover impacts on the cost of living for all of us and have hit the poorest the hardest. So it's little wonder that progress on health is stagnating, that global life expectancy has declined for the first time in 30 years, and that only 16% of the Sustainable Development Goals targets are on track to be met by 2030. The 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change provides the overarching framework for addressing climate change. Associated with it are a range of processes, all relevant directly or indirectly to health, including vulnerability and adaptation assessments, health national adaptation plans, nationally determined contributions, and long-term low emissions and development strategies. At the 29th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties in Baku right now, there are both a health pavilion and a health day, thanks in no small part to the hard work of WHO and other committed global health activists. Close to 90 countries have committed to developing climate-resilient health systems. Yet we all know that the health sector could be much more fully engaged in these global and national policy processes around climate change. This year's Lancet Countdown report noted that the number of governments which actually mentioned health and climate change together in their annual UN General Debate statements fell from 50% in 2022 to 35% in 2023. And the WHO reports that 91% of nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement do include health considerations, but only a third can actually identify health co-benefits of climate change mitigation, and only 11% include an emissions reduction commitment for the health sector itself. Overall, we must see the global failure to address climate change effectively not just as a policy failure. It's also a profound failure to ensure equity and justice. Low-income countries have contributed only around 8% of emissions historically, but they do experience some of the most severe climate impacts. That's why discussion at this year's Conference of Parties in Baku around climate finance flows to low and middle income countries, including through the Loss and Damage Fund, are so crucial, both to support adaptation and mitigation by those countries, and as an acknowledgement that the historical responsibility for the stock of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere lies with the high-income countries. Central to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. While every country shares a responsibility to act, the high-income and historically high-emitting states bear the greater responsibility and should be providing support to others accordingly. My second point, How can our health systems contribute to climate justice and address the impacts of climate change on health equity? Health systems, of course, can contribute to a just transition to a net zero future by consciously acting to mitigate and adapt to climate change while also improving health equity. But this will require nuanced and strategic thinking and a change of tactics. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's sixth assessment report drew attention to important principles in climate action, of equity and fairness, of inclusivity and participation, of responsibility and accountability. These principles must drive mitigation and adaptation efforts, including in the health sector. Equity and climate change adaptation and resilience building measures are essential to ensure that all communities, especially those with limited resources, have access to adequate health care and protection from climate-related health risks. We need inclusive decision-making processes to achieve this. And those processes should engage and support women, youth, marginalised communities, Indigenous peoples, and local populations to lead. Sharing power with those who are directly and disproportionately affected will help ensure that solutions are more impactful and more sustainable. To do that, the health sector needs to look at its own governance and who is actually making the decisions. Clearly, health systems can improve their readiness to be frontline responders to climate disasters. Health policies can help build climate resilience. National health and climate change adaptation plans can drive that. And health-driven climate policies can improve equity if they are directed towards supporting marginalised groups. There needs to be a focus on designing policy with co-benefits, like for the reduced respiratory illness, which comes from cleaner air, and the health benefits from transport systems, which prioritise safe walking and cycling. As well, health systems should be reducing their own emissions by looking for sustainability across their whole operations, from energy and transport to the very materials they use and how they dispose of them. This really is a case of physician, heal thyself. My third point, realising the promise of the Paris Agreement to steer the world away from catastrophic climate change and towards a net zero future requires cross-society and whole-of-government action. That must include health policy and systems researchers. And like all communities, this one, our one, can do more. Throughout my career in public life, I've seen the importance evidence plays in achieving policy goals. Researchers supply that evidence, and it's up to us to arm policymakers and communities with it to inspire climate action. I am only too well aware that we live in an era when skilled populist politicians are refusing to accept what the scientific evidence is telling them, and instead are steering a course often based on misinformation on everything from public health to climate change and broader economic and social policy and foreign relations as well. So this is all the more reason for the health policy and systems research community to step up efforts to bring compelling evidence about the need for change to the public in ways that the lay person can comprehend. We do need to improve public health and science communication so that it reaches beyond the academic publications and conferences to reach wider and diverse publics. The populist anti-health, anti-science narrative has to be beaten at its own game. We must also encourage long-view leadership among policymakers. I have been a health minister. I know how easy it can be to be just overwhelmed by the public dissatisfaction with the length of hospital waiting lists and times for treatment. But health ministers also know that the demand for services will grow exponentially if the drivers of that growth are not addressed. So, just as we know that the lung cancer and emphysema wards of a hospital would be overflowing if we failed to address rates of tobacco smoking, so our respiratory illness wards and our emergency and other services will be overwhelmed without tackling air pollution, without preparing to respond to the climate change threats we already face, and without reducing our emissions. Let's provide national and local policymakers with the evidence of what is coming down the track if they do not act on climate change. We need to show how health policy and health systems can mitigate, adapt, and build climate resilience. We need more country-specific evidence to guide action, translating global evidence to local realities, and fostering greater learning across and between countries. At the Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research, we subscribe to the principles which the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change highlighted as essential. The climate crisis is one of 5 focus areas in our new strategy. We're already supporting researchers in many countries in this area. And please, if you would like to hear more, join the Alliance's session on this tomorrow morning. So the Alliance will play its part in supporting this research community to deliver health policy and systems research which is enabling of the just transition. I know you're all committed. Attendance at this plenary is evidence of that. I know how important and critically impactful your work can be, and we need more of it. Planetary health and the just transition can't just remain abstract frameworks or aspirations, and this research community can make a major contribution to moving these concepts to reality and actuality. Thank you all.
And I think I've heard that she will be coming back during the discussion time online. And I think her speech is very encouraging and also very intriguing. And she mentioned the 3 points, and first one is the governance and also the policy process. Second one is justice and equity. And third one is Paris Agreement importance and the importance of research. So I think that in each of these 3 points, we can contribute to the connection between the climate change and the health issues. Okay, so thank you very much. And I would now like to call the second speaker, Ms. Shweta Narayan, to the podium.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here, and I think I'll keep up the tradition of making 3 points as led by Honorable Helen Clarke. And as a campaigner, it's my duty to repeat. So a lot of the stuff that I will speak over here is basically a repetition, and that's what I think that's my job, and we must repeat messages. But before that, I want to walk us through the grim reality, the truth that we face today when it comes to planetary and climate and health crisis. The fact remains that our Earth, our planet, is facing unprecedented challenges. We're facing the crisis, the triple planetary crisis, biodiversity loss, environmental pollution, and the climate crisis. Now, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, we are at risk of losing over 1 million species within decades. Environmental pollution further complicates this crisis. Most of our air, waters, and lands are polluted. I mean, I come from India, and right now, while the climate crisis conversations, the climate conference is going on in Baku, the other news in India and in South Asia is about the deadly hazardous air pollution. And that's the reality. In fact, we no longer have winter season, we have the air pollution season. And that's the reality that we live in. And that's the reality of pollution. According to the United Nations Environmental Program assessment, pollution caused 9 million premature deaths in 2019. That's 1 in 6 deaths worldwide. And when it comes to the climate crisis, we know that the climate crisis is not a crisis in the future. We are living it right now. Air pollution was one example. Our colleagues from Philippines are witness to 5 deadly typhoons in a month. That's the reality that we are living in. We are not talking about something in the future. It's our lived experience. For this session, I wanted to curate a list from 2024 alone of places which have witnessed extreme weather events or catastrophic climate disasters. We are in November. We still have a month to go. This is not a comprehensive list by any chance. I may have missed something. But this is the reality of what we are living in. This is the reality of the climate crisis. Now, but the second part that I want to bring before you and discuss today is addressing the root causes. And it's important for us to understand and ground ourselves. Before we take action, we need to know what we are dealing with and how do we tackle the root causes. Now, it's a reality today that our addiction to fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, is driving the triple planetary crisis, the biodiversity loss, the climate crisis, and the pollution crisis. And when we talk about the addiction to fossil fuels, we're not just talking about carbon. We're talking about toxics. We're talking about chemical pollution. We are talking about the social harm and the climate risks that fossil fuel pose towards us. Throughout the life cycle, from exploration to production, consumption, and the end period of fossil fuel infrastructure, there is harm that is caused throughout parallel to the human life cycle, from fetus to older age. And we often hear about air pollution, and air pollution is one aspect of the harm of fossil fuels. According to the latest research, air pollution causes 8.1 million premature deaths annually. Most of it is driven by the burning of fossil fuels. And in terms of cost, in terms of the economic loss, it's almost 6% of the global GDP. That's the loss from air pollution alone. And air pollution is one of the harms from fossil fuel. These are the documented impacts associated with fossil fuels. And if you see the research, no part of human body or no part of the human life cycle is unaffected from the fossil fuel harms. We have reproductive damage, neurological damage, cardiovascular damage, cancers, death and early mortality. The chemicals discharged through the life cycle in the fossil fuel production lives in the environment for decades and has the potential to cause harm through several generations. So we're not even talking about immediate, midterm, or chronic. We're talking about intergenerational harm and injustices when we're talking about fossil fuels. And pollution is one aspect of the harm that we see from the fossil fuel infrastructure and the industry. The other harm, the other aspect is the social harm that fossil economy produces, which leads to tangible health harm. We've seen human rights abuses, forced displacement and marginalization of indigenous people, social disruptions, economic disruptions, gender-based violence, and the list goes on. All of this, the economy-wide impact of the fossil economy has a tangible health harm element that is important for the health community to understand and take cognizance of in providing evidence to the policymakers. And of course, the most recent one is in the context of the climate crisis, the harm that the fossil fuel infrastructure poses. Most of the fossil infrastructure is in low-lying coastal areas, and in times of hurricanes and typhoons and flooding, there is added risk of contamination, accidents, and pollution that again stay in the environment and human bodies for decades. Fossil fuel is also driving the climate crisis. So the climate crisis is a fossil fuel crisis and is also a health crisis. And we come across this a lot. We have seen the effects of extreme weather events. 2024 is now on record to be the hottest year ever, beating the previous record of 2023. We are seeing increased vector-borne, waterborne diseases. We are seeing displacement, forced migration, and the list goes on. Again, to reiterate what Helen mentioned earlier, that the element of injustice when it comes to the climate crisis is glaring. According to the research, the Global Climate Risk Index research, 8 out of 10 countries who are most vulnerable to the risks of climate crisis are low and middle income countries. Countries who have least contributed to the problem are most vulnerable to the impacts and have the least capacity to cope with the impacts. And that we are seeing repeated extreme weather events, repeated cyclones, repeated floods don't give the opportunity for countries to recover before they tackle the next disaster. Now, I just want to talk about the costs, because I think this is, I mean, from a climate perspective, this is an important year with the finance, the focus on finance, climate finance. And for all of us in the health community, it's important to know the cost, because we are often told that there's no money to service the health systems or to set up new health systems. And here is a glaring example of discrimination and the staggering numbers. The global fossil fuel subsidies, according to the International Monetary Fund, in 2022 equals 7.1% of the global GDP. That's $7 trillion US. And here is another number that I would like to mention when we talk about the cost and who's profiting. According to research, the fossil fuel corporations since 1970 make a staggering $3 billion US profit every day. And they have made this profit for the last 50 years. When we are talking about, we often hear, as I said, that there's no money for healthcare infrastructure. This is where the money is going. We are subsidizing industry that is killing us by our health. This is the reality. So there's an urgent need to redirect fossil fuel subsidies to invest in healthcare, in education, in development of countries. And the other grim reality is that climate crisis and the fossil fuel crisis not only damages our health, but also our healthcare infrastructure. So when in calamities, when people need the health services the most, they're finding the health services not even, totally destroyed or damaged at times when they need the services the most. This is a picture, and I want to make this reference because this is a picture from the 2015 floods in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu. I used to live in Chennai, and this is, for me, 2015 was the year when the Paris Agreement was negotiated, and for me, this is the ground reality in which we all exist and our own daily crisis when we are talking about in spaces where there are global negotiations done. Now, my third part, quickly, is the solution aspect. And we often, again, I have heard it many number of times that the health community members often say that Isn't climate and planetary health something that the policymakers need to tackle? What is our role? And this is the interesting part for me, because I strongly feel, and I think, and I hope I will be able to convince all of you by the end of the session, or end of 3 days, we will be convinced that the health community has a very, very critical, crucial role in leadership on climate action, especially in times when there is a massive trust deficit in the policymakers and the politicians around the world. Now, why the health community? And the evidence is in this graph. This is the Global Trustworthiness Ranking of 2023, which puts doctors at the top and the most trusted voices in the world. And it's by means no surprise that politicians are among the bottom lot. I would say that it's not just the doctors. I would say it's the doctors, nurses, the community health responders. It's the health professionals and the health community members who are among the most trusted and most credible voices. And by that virtue alone, have a very important voice in this space. I would also like to refer to the rich history of advocacy, of activism that the health community has to offer. And I'm presenting to you, again, 3 critical case studies in this. My first case study to all of you is from 1854, nothing new for this community, but again, a reminder that it was a public health, medical professionals, research rooted in community, in evidence from the ground, from the testimonies on interviews of the community members and workers that completely changed the understanding about cholera. You would be surprised that before Dr. John Snow's work, cholera was supposed to be caused by bad odors. It was the investigation, it was the public health research that was conducted by Dr. John Snow that reframed the whole idea of the source of problem of cholera, that led to the discovery of the hand pump, the Broad Street hand pump in Soho in London, which is still there as a reminder of the public health work that was done. Without the hand was symbolically removed because that was the source of cholera, and this is 1854. This research became the foundation for the Sanitation Acts and urban planning across, not just in UK, but across the world. That's 1854. My next example of the leadership of health community comes from the US with the occupational health work around the black lung disease, and it was the phenomenal evidence and advocacy led by Dr. Donald Rasmussen, Dr. Buff, and Dr. Wells at the Miners Memorial Hospital, where they not only went through 40,000 or over 40,000 lung x-rays to determine the effect of coal dust on, and black lung disease, but it was their advocacy. They're providing this information to the coal miners in organizing, joining them in solidarity at the picket lines, and also testifying at courts and senates to bring together the black lung disease law in the US. Now, you would be surprised again that for the longest time, the coal mining corporations actually believed and propagated that black lung disease was good for the coal miners because it prevented tuberculosis. That was the narrative that corporations had. And that was rebuffed by 3 doctors with the evidence that saw them in their clinics and the application of that evidence in the communities and at the policy level. And my last example, not the least, is just to recognize this, the city that we are in, the city of Nagasaki, and the message of resilience and hope that it provides, and also to remind us that the health community had a very important role to play in reframing nuclear wars as a health issue. And this is in 1980, at the peak of Cold War, a cardiologist, Dr. Bernhard Lohn from US, and a cardiologist, Dr. and pardon I might not pronounce the name right, Evgeny Chekhov from USSR came together, recognized the health implications of nuclear war, and started the International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War in 1980. And in 5 years, there was global mobilization in over 40 countries with over 130,000 members. And they got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985, and the Nobel Committee recognized their work in reframing nuclear war as a health issue as the instrumental, phenomenal intervention for which they deserved the Peace Prize. So there is history, there is a rich legacy of advocacy. If we have done this in the 1800s and the 1960s and the 1980s, today we are faced with a climate crisis, and we have within us the capacity to take on the climate crisis on the same lines as we have taken on the previous crisis. And what are those common strategies? And this is a repetition of what Helen mentioned. The evidence-based knowledge becomes important. Education of impacted stakeholders, legal action, policy change, cross-social solidarity becomes important. And when I mention this, I'm not expecting all of us to take to the streets tomorrow. I think we have a role here, and we should remember that we have a very important role to play. We might not be leading these conversations, we might not be leading these movements, but we have contributions to make beyond our health systems, beyond our hospitals. We have a contribution to make in shaping the future that we desire to have. Just my final few words. Health is a very, very powerful theme. It's a shared concern for all of us, and even in the communities. It's one theme that can bring people together across race, across class, caste, gender. It's a shared concern, and the health community, with its evidence that it's witnessing on climate on a daily basis, be it on air pollution or infectious disease, needs to provide that evidence to build community resistance and to also to inform policymakers for better evidence-informed policies. I strongly urge all of you, let's address the root causes of the climate crisis. Let's address the crisis of fossil fuels that we're facing today, and let's work towards a just transition away from fossil fuels, because if we don't address the root causes, all the hard work that we've done and our predecessors have done in the global health space is at risk. And in order to continue that good work, we need to address the crisis of fossil fuels that we're facing today. So I'm going to end here, and I hope to have more conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta. Very nice talk, and you starting from the reality, and which is very bitter ones, and including the injustice issues, and also she demonstrated how the just burning or combustion of the fossil fuels can lead to the many impacts and the various aspects of the health, not only health, but also the healthcare systems itself. But she just changed the, she just showed our, the sweet reality by showing that healthcare professionals are on the top of the trusted people, and at least better than the politicians. But anyway, and I think she can demonstrate what we can do, not only for the healthcare system, but also the real crisis that we are facing, and by raising your voices and raising your evidences. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we will have the third speaker. The third speaker is Susannah Mayhew, and she also derives 10 minutes talk. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to listen to the first couple of days of exciting discussions. So Shweta has brilliantly articulated the magnitude of the climate and the biodiversity emergency and the urgency with which we as the health systems and policy research community need to act to protect health for future generations. I want to put forward a vision for health systems reflecting on what our community can bring to the climate debate and what we can learn from history to build a new pathway to just, sustainable, climate-resilient health systems. Now, you can see from this slide that there has been a steady increase in articles published on climate and health over the past decades, but there are still big gaps in our evidence, both geographically, as you can see from the map, but also in content. So the vast majority of articles on climate and health are on the health impacts, and there's big reason for that, and we need to know what those impacts are to use for policy advocacy. But there are very few, as you can see, on mitigation and adaptation, which concern health systems. And policy research is almost non-existent in relation to climate and health. This is partly a funding issue. It's been extremely difficult to get funding for health systems research related to climate, particularly for adaptation research. But it's also a failure on our part to develop work in this field. So the theme of this conference is hugely to be welcomed, and the organizers should be very much congratulated. However, given our theme, the unfortunate clash with the second week of COP29, the climate COP, speaks to how much we continue to talk to ourselves. If the climate sector were a country, it would be the world's 5th largest emitter. We should be a stronger part of climate negotiations, and we need far greater urgency within our professional community, far more action, and a new, wider vision. We have a huge amount of expertise within our community and relevant scholarship in areas critical to understanding climate interconnections, which you can see from this word cloud. But where is this work in relation to climate change? Our systems scholarship should be informing how health systems can adapt and transform in the face of climate challenges. Our policy scholarship should be informing what enablers there might be to promoting policy change and accountability in climate health action. Now, I want to reflect on some lessons from the past and then come back to the future. Remember this? The eerie quietness of once busy roads during the COVID lockdowns. The fear of a highly infectious pandemic outbreak galvanized governments around the world into rapid action. The scale of government response across the world was striking, and its contrast to government inaction on climate change is equally striking. Normally, when there's a trade-off between the environment and the economy invariably wins. But this was not the case with COVID, which saw actions that severely hurt both national economies and household income. Of course, highly infectious pandemic diseases, even with a very low case fatality rate, represent an immediate and personal threat. And perceived government failure to act can damage near-term election prospects, though there was a big political incentive to respond rapidly. It was also assumed to be time-limited, so draconian measures were not expected to last. Climate change, on the other hand, is a long-term issue, as it's still a distant threat to too many of us, and climate responses still lack political commitment to action on the scale that the emergency requires. And there are too many powerful vested interests from the fossil fuel industry, which we've heard about, and as the farce unfolding in Baku starkly illustrates. But what COVID gave us was a natural experiment to assess the impact that radical climate action could have. So the left-hand figure on this slide shows the upward trajectory of global daily fossil CO2 emissions from 1970. And the red line at the end shows daily emissions between January 2020 and the end of April 2020 as COVID and the lockdown restrictions hit. And the line drops so starkly, you almost miss it, thinking it's an error in the graph. The right-hand figure shows the decline in those months in 2020 by sector. And you probably can't see it, but the biggest decrease was in surface transport in green and aviation in red. So overall, there was an estimated 8% temporary reduction in carbon emissions by the end of 2020. We need to reduce our carbon emissions by 43% by 2030. That's in 6 years' time. And as we've already heard, we're not on target. We will not reach that. It's not only carbon emissions. There are other harmful gases we need to reduce as well. These images using NASA data show the concentrations of nitrogen dioxide across eastern China, again, from early 2020, before COVID quarantine, and then late February 2020, during quarantines on the right. And these sorts of images serve as a stark reminder of how closely global warming and air quality and pollution, and therefore respiratory health and the health systems that provide that care, are linked. So what are the climate lessons from COVID? Well, reductions in emissions are hard to sustain with our current economic paradigm and structures. Emissions had returned to close to pre-pandemic levels by the end of 2020, not only because of increasing movement again of people, but also because our economies are still reliant on fossil fuel-based technologies. So reducing emissions permanently requires our economies and our health sectors and our health financing to transition to low carbon emitting technology. And this is important also as we think about adaptation, because inevitably there will be trade-offs. In a heat wave, do we cool our maternity wards with air conditioners? Do we do it sometimes? Or can we only use low carbon methods? Can critical supply chains be secured using only green energy? How do we put pressure on governments and industry to transition the wider economy in which the health sector is a big player? Clearly, what happens in the health sector does affect the wider economy. And post-COVID planning decisions now will affect emissions pathways well into the future. So the data on COVID impact tell us that whatever we pursue needs to be radical if we are to achieve the transformative changes that we need to protect health. And casting an eye further back into history is helpful because we've been here before. Massive human-induced ecological damage in the North American prairies caused devastating dust storms for almost a decade, considered the worst ecological disaster in US history. The New Deal was Franklin Roosevelt's flagship policy to combat this ecological disaster and the Great Depression. And it involved a radical program of social security, state investment in major public works, creating jobs and infrastructure, and strict financial regulations. These were radical state-funded measures. Something similar has been envisaged in the global climate sector with the idea of a global Green New Deal. This was first mooted by UNEP in 2009 as a big push strategy involving investment, redistributions, and reparations. And like Roosevelt's New Deal, the Green New Deal is similarly radical in its scale, ambition, and spirit. Obviously, the context is very different. Climate change is global, not national crisis, and international agreements, as we know, are painfully slow and frequently jeopardized by powerful vested interests. But the initiative is far from dead. In 2019, the EU Green New Deal was a headline policy of the 2019 European Commission. And now, a global alliance of 27 lawmakers and their supporters from 22 nations across the globe has been established, which also seeks to draw lessons from COVID to push for a different path. And importantly, it's one that's premised on inclusive justice to ensure that it's no longer the poorest who suffer most from the climate and health crisis. And we, the health policy and systems community, need to find a similarly radical vision to put ourselves on a different path that aligns with this vision. So here's my proposal, which I hope that you can think about and debate further during this conference, and then act to become part of a change movement, part of the climate solution to protect health through health systems that are resilient, sustainable, and just, as this conference proclaims. First, we need to widen our vision and our partnerships. We need to work with frontline clinicians and disease experts beyond the health systems silo. Primary care providers are a formidable force working at the front lines of climate impact, so we, the health systems community, need to be in partnership with them. Some of the best current work on climate change in health systems is in relation to maternal health and heat, in which health systems researchers and economists collaborate with maternal health experts, as well as built environment experts, to identify very concrete adaptation and mitigation actions that can be undertaken at the grassroots, and that's illustrated. You can't really see the detail, but concrete actions that you can take, painting roofs in reflective white, overhanging eaves, and so on. This is a High Horizons project funded by the EU. And we must collaborate beyond the health sector with built environment, but also with others, with energy, with Met Office, with climatologists, conservationists, and climate activists. We need innovative partnerships, like this small program that I'm involved with in Ruchiga in Uganda, which is a partnership between conservationists and local health facilities to integrate actions across sustainable livelihoods, wetlands restoration, and health needs. We need to research and shape cross-sector governance mechanisms, and our community has long experience as researchers and also advocates and decision makers. We need to pool our expertise to shape new governance mechanisms that are more equal, more inclusive, more just, and this is a major theme at the conference. We need more inclusive research. We need to work with, not for, frontline decision makers and affected communities and indigenous groups. This research program, PARAS, that I co-lead with Makerere University in Uganda, is concerned with evidencing mechanisms for more inclusive decision-making for crisis response, incorporating local wisdom, and bringing health systems actors into more equitable engagement with grassroots communities to build resilience. And again, these are all themes at this conference which we'll be debating. And we need innovative financing, ex-ante financing. And I've borrowed this image from a colleague, Joe Borgi, who gave the closing keynote at the Health Economics I Hear conference last year. Much of climate and health financing reported to date is what economists refer to as passive co-financing, or ex post, the health sector funding the consequences of climate change after the event, or climate financing that offers health co-benefits, but by accident, not design. We need to move towards ex-ante mechanisms, so preemptively seeking to reduce climate risk to health and health systems and maximize joint gains. And we need donor commitment to fund, well, to fill the gaps in our evidence base on the research side, but also to fund innovative research initiatives, not just business as usual, but put a new vision, new partnerships, more ambitious goals. And finally, we need new leadership. The status quo is not going to get us where we need to be. There is a vacuum of global leadership in climate and health, particularly climate and health systems. And leadership has not been shown by the institutions that we typically turn to in health. It was only last year that there was a dedicated health day at the COP. It was yesterday, and again, we should have been part of that. We need new leadership to push this agenda, leadership that thinks and reflects the big themes of this conference, that is more just and inclusive. And we need to think differently and more bravely about what this could look like in the light of the priorities you see here. So as a first step, I propose that we establish a platform to pool, synthesize, and package climate change and health systems research for policymakers, and that we gather case studies and of practical examples of action from those working on the front lines, what was referred to by someone in a session, our session this morning, as bite-sized actions that everybody can relate to. And we need to form new innovative partnerships that are explicitly cross-sector, beyond our own sector, to use the evidence that we collate and to push for urgent policy and systems change. And if you are interested in being part of this, I would love to hear from you, and my email and Shweta's email at the end of our presentations. So the time for talking has long passed. We all have an obligation to act now, urgently, and for the long term, because this is not just another fad. No one alive today, not the smallest baby, will see the end of life-threatening human-induced climate change during their lifetimes. This affects every part of current and future health systems and their ability to protect human health. So we owe it both to the people dying today and to future generations to act. And there are many opportunities at this conference to learn what actions to take and to be engaged. Join them, because the only way that we can really fail is by not trying. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I think she take a very good example of the COVID-19 and what it did for the whole, not only the health, but also economies and other things, and reduction of the CO2 emission. But actually, we need other very different pathways to the new society. And finally, she proposed her new deal proposal, and it was very detailed and also very specific. And I think that we can think about each of the items from now on, and maybe we can discuss in the discussion time. Okay, thank you so much. So finally, okay, to explore all these themes further, which has been presented by all the speakers, I'm happy to hand over to our moderator, Associate Professor Renzo Guinto, who will lead us in the panel discussion. Thank you, Renzo, and over to you.
Thank you. Arigato. Arigato, Professor Chiho. Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Is the microphone working? Yes. Very good, wonderful. Konnichiwa, good afternoon, everyone. Wow, it's a deep pleasure and honor to be moderating this opening panel at the 8th Global Symposium. And there are 3 reasons why I am very thrilled that this is happening. First, as alluded to already by Susannah, we have a thematic working group on climate resilient and sustainable health systems that I chair, that Susannah co-chair. We also have our members in the audience. And I'm also joining the board of Health Systems Global, and I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity. We have this opportunity to bridge the community of health systems and the planetary health community. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that you mentioned, Susannah, a while ago that the time for talking is over, right? But also the time for HSG to talk about climate is now. And if you remember, back in 2014, we were in the 3rd Global Symposium. I think it was the 3rd in Cape Town. And we were dreaming about climate change and planetary health to be at the center stage of Health Systems Global. Now is the time, and I think we should be very proud of what we have achieved. And thirdly, because, and the third reason is that I have the privilege of moderating this conversation with 3 amazing women that I personally admire, but I also had the chance to work with, with Helen Clarke. Of course, we were developing this agenda around healthy societies, which was, if you remember, one of the 3 billion targets of the WHO. There's universal health coverage, there's pandemic preparedness, health security, and healthy societies. And addressing climate change and planetary health is certainly part of that 3rd priority agenda. Of course, with Shweta, we met for the first time 10 years ago we were fighting coal-fired power plants. You know, I in the Philippines, Shweta in India, and since then, we've never stopped trying to really tackle climate change and fight, you know, the big powers that created the crisis. And of course, I already mentioned Susannah. I remember that Cape Town conversation. We went to Liverpool. I remember very vividly during the closing ceremony, I highlighted that of the 1,000 abstracts in that conference, only one abstract mentioned the phrase climate change, and that is Susannah's abstract. So now we have not only abstracts, but entire sessions, including the opening plenary dedicated to climate. So again, we've come a long way. What we're going to do in the around 25 minutes that we have is I'll just ask quick questions to our panelists, drawing from what they just shared in their fantastic presentations, to be followed by, we'll have a Slido. Again, you've had a demo of that a while ago. We believe that you're not just the audience, you're the fifth panelist in this important conversation. And then towards the end, we'll try to be concrete. What should we be doing as the health policy and systems research community? I'll start with Helen. And Helen, you know, we would love you to be part of this conversation here, physically in Nagasaki, but we're very grateful that you can join us virtually. You're amazing. You know, you've been a head of state, a leader of the United Nations. You've been to so many COPs, but also you have been an integral member of the health community. You chaired the Commission on Universal Healthcare. You were co-chairing the independent panel on pandemic preparedness. You even co-chair our Common Air, you know, which is the initiative around clean air, and so many others. And so you've had this exposure and experience, and even, you know, being embedded in both the health community, but also these larger communities. You've seen geopolitics unfold during your premiership and in your leadership in the UN. And you mentioned in your presentation, we need new tactics, we need new strategies in order to tackle, you know, the planetary health crisis that we're facing. So maybe you can elaborate based on your experience, based on your, you know, firsthand knowledge of, you know, from the negotiations all the way to what's happening at the national policy level. What can we do differently to make sure that we win this battle? Helen, thank you.
Thank you, Renzo, and greetings, fellow panelists. I think a key thing for me is for health to come out of its silo. Often the health world is quite a self-contained one, and I think, as Suzanne said in her speech, the fact that this conference is at the same time as the COP, which does, after all, have a health day and stream now, perhaps tells us something. I was co-chairing the Pathfinder Commission with Joy Pumafi and Sir Andy Haynes, which was looking at the issue of designing for co-benefit for both health and climate. And when the researchers looked for, you know, actual examples of where this was happening, it was incredibly thin. So I think a new tactic has to be to get health, you know, right into the conversation around the design of climate action, so that you do design explicitly for co-benefits. For example, you know, air pollution has kind of fallen through the stools of government action so often, and yet to get down greenhouse gas emissions will be to get down air pollution, which will be to improve health. So you know, just finding these synergies and ways in which the different communities and disciplines and departments of government and so on can come together to co-design for impact for both, I think is going to be incredibly important. So I think the new tactic in a way is the old homily, come out of silos, work across disciplines and at the policymaker level, of course, across departmental areas, and look for win-wins all round. I think that health is such a powerful entry point to the climate conversation. You know, often if you're, you know, sitting remotely somewhere, a drought in the Sahel, the plight of the polar bear, it may seem a little remote, but when you are told that your health is going to be on the line because of rising temperatures, because of the increasing incidence of the tick and mosquito-borne diseases, because of the threat around the coastlines and rivers and everyone who resides at risk of flooding. When it comes down to our own health and circumstances, we suddenly sit up. And I think health has a very powerful narrative to convey in this respect, that we need action because it matters for our planet and for our health. Back to you, Renzo.
Thank you, Helen, for those remarks. Now I'll move to Shweta. And I remember we were in COP21 in Paris when the Paris Agreement was made and agreed upon. But we're not in Baku now. You're not in Baku, you're not in COP. And I wonder, what are your thoughts about the ongoing negotiations, but also the broader climate governance regime? And how should we be engaging with the climate negotiations, the international climate regime moving forward?
Thanks, Renzo. And I was not in Paris.
Oh, you weren't?
I was not.
See,
the health community was there. As I mentioned, when the Paris negotiation was being decided, my city, Chennai, was underwater. So we were battling a different crisis.
Yep.
But it's a very important question, and I think it's important to also remember that while the health community definitely needs to be present in the climate negotiations, because these, as Helen said, health is such a powerful argument. It humanizes the climate impact. It makes it real, it makes it relevant, it makes it personal. So the health community has a duty to be present in these negotiations and influence this negotiation so that there is a good health outcome. At the same time, there are spaces like these, there are conferences and discussions that's happening that have equal importance and influence in policy making space, in community mobilization space. And if we are talking about climate as a crisis and as an emergency, then I think it's our responsibility as climate action advocates to act like there's a crisis and emergency and make climate the theme of every conversation. So that's why I'm here. And my colleagues are in Baku.
Yep. And we should be panicking, right? Because, as Greta Thunberg once said, we should be, in emergency mode, acting as if the house is on fire, because we are on fire, literally, especially in some places. And I appreciate that, you're saying we need to be in the spaces that we haven't reached yet, And in fact, I was reflecting and observing the many different global health conferences that have been happening. A few years ago, we had a session at the HIV/AIDS Congress, and then every specialty now is talking about climate. And again, now Health Systems Global, the community of health policy and systems researchers are now really putting a spotlight on the climate emergency, which now leads me to Susannah. You even presented an agenda, right? And I think that's something we should work on as a society together moving forward. But you also alluded to what happened during COVID, right? When, in a way, it's a natural experiment. We saw what could be, cleaner air, less emissions. But that's in the context of a different crisis, right? And so maybe while we may have missed that opportunity, maybe you have some thoughts on how we can, really learn the lessons from a previous crisis or any other crisis, but also how to reorganize, our health systems in general, but also our research community in particular.
I think, as I said, COVID highlighted what could be done. And it also highlighted what governments can do when motivated politically. So the challenge for climate change is that each government is only in power for a limited term, and they're not bothered about implementing the sorts of harsh actions that COVID saw for something where they're not going to reap the benefits of those actions, because they will reap longer-term benefits. But as I said, we as a community, we've heard health is a powerful advocate in this space. We should be using our evidence from the ground much more proactively in these spaces and say, look, yes, the long-term climate impacts you will see in a generation or 2 or 3 or 5, but people are dying now, and there are things that we could and should be doing now. There was some discussion in the session this morning about can we wait for research? We can't wait, we have to act now, but we have to have the research to go alongside. So I think that there are, it is a very different crisis, but there are things, we need to keep that urgency for action, and we need to act together. And the reason I mentioned in the platform is that it's not only about pooling research knowledge, it's about pooling grassroots action knowledge. Because there are lots of actions happening now, they're not researched, they're not documented. We can evaluate those as they're happening in natural experiments, if you like, but we need to make those findable, we need to share those, we need to scale them up, and we need donors to come and commit to funding. It's been extraordinarily difficult to get funding for cross-sector work, for example. So the little project in Uganda that I mentioned, the health donors were not interested in that, so it was actually the Department for Food and Agriculture, or that's not the right acronym, DEFRA in the UK, who funded that. But we need people to be brave, to fund innovative work that may be risky, it may fail, but we'll learn from that. So we can't wait, we need to act now. There's plenty that we can do, and we should be advocates for that.
Wonderful. So, calling the research community here to be open to new ways of working. We cannot anymore rely on, the traditional approaches that we do, because again, climate change is already happening, impacting people's lives, and communities are already witnessing the effects, and they definitely, carry a lot of wisdom that can inform action. But also to the funders in the room, we would love to invite you to put in more investment in climate and health research in general, but also climate and health systems research in particular, because I think this group is now ready to do more work in this emerging space. Before I open the Slido, I just have one more question, and this is open to all three of you. You all mentioned the phrase climate justice. It's even in the theme of this conference, right? Building just and sustainable health systems, centering the people, protecting the planet. But climate justice oftentimes, feels like an abstract, vague, floating idea. And I think there's a need to really operationalize it, make it more concrete. Some say the loss and damage fund is one form of climate justice. Some people use and a few of you also use the term reparations. But how does climate justice really look like in the real world? And I know you are coming from different spaces. Helen, at the level of policy and international governance, maybe you can share a bit about climate justice at that level. Shweta, more from the grassroots, the communities, from an activist point of view. And of course, how should we researchers of health policy and systems engage and concretize climate justice and health justice? Who wants to start? We can choose a different order if you want, but Helen, you can also start if you want.
She's on mute.
I think, Helen is muted, so,
yeah,
okay.
The words just and justice come up in different contexts, don't they? I mean, we talk about just transition, and that recognizes that some groups in society will be adversely impacted by a transition which does not make alternative provision for them. And I'll give obvious examples. If you're going to phase out of coal for energy, as the world must, that we can't achieve where we need to be without that. We're all aware that there are countries with significant employment in coal. So if you're going to phase out of coal, as you must, then governments need to be making decisions about what is the future for the people in those communities. What's the alternative economic future? Otherwise, you'll get enormous opposition to the transition. People will say, well, it's not caring about me. Similarly, I totally support every call for the removal of fossil fuel subsidies. But again, if that's done without some kind of cash transfer or mitigation for the poorest people, they can end up the losers from that as well. So that term of justice in the transition is very important. At the global level, climate justice is very much around making those responsible for the historical stock of carbon in the atmosphere actually pay up. I think in my speech I made the comment that only about 8% of the historical stock of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere comes from low-income countries, but disproportionately they are facing the impacts. So in general, climate finance has to be geared to enabling those societies both to adapt to what is already happening and will happen as the climate continues to warm until it reaches an equilibrium, which we hope can be at a lower point than some of the trajectories are suggesting. And then also the loss and damage fund is around financing specifically for when there are incredibly adverse events, which are really too expensive for countries to finance the recovery from. And a point to make is that while for low-income countries there is concessional lending and finance and donors are still to some extent interested, once you move into the middle-income country status, just a step up the ladder, in many cases, there's no concessional finance for you. So the loss and damage fund aims to fill some of that gap. So if you're a middle-income country like Antigua and Barbuda loses 95% of its infrastructure, as it did in the hurricane in recent years, there's somewhere to go for reasonable financing. So lots to talk about in that space.
Yep, excellent. Shweta or Susannah?
Yeah,
Shweta.
I can go next, yeah.
Sure.
Just to build on what Helen said, to me, climate justice is social justice. It's gender justice. It's environmental justice. It's ensuring that marginalized folks are not marginalized anymore. Indigenous people have the leadership and their right to, and everybody has a right to the clean, healthy environment. So climate justice, to me, is not an abstract topic, but it's very related to the very existence of everybody in every part of the world, especially the most marginalized and the most vulnerable. And the climate justice can be operationalized when we devise policies that truly does not leave anybody behind.
Yep. Susannah?
I think the health sector, the health research community has some interesting precedent for justice movement. We haven't tended to call them justice movements, I suppose, but the sexual and reproductive health movement, which is part of my background, was quite influential when it gathered together a coalition of grassroots agencies fighting for women's rights, for reproductive rights, to push the global discourse from population control issues to reproductive rights. And they learned the UN language. They began to negotiate in bodies that they did not engage with before. And then, of course, we've got the HIV example, which is a real community-driven, albeit with a sort of global connection to rich, wealthy lawyers in the US, but still, it was very much a grassroots community that pushed for massive policy and funding change. And I think we need to galvanize those sorts of actions in the health sector and health community now. And I think that the public frontline doctors, care providers are those people. If we can gather them together as activists to push these impacts that we're seeing on climate and to push for reparations, for finance, for justice coming down to the decentralized level, that would be an extraordinarily powerful movement, and it is neglected in the research space, the primary care level. And I think decentralizing decision-making authority is an important part of that. So you can get a grassroots push for action, for finance, for policy change, but you also have to then allow decentralized decisions to take place about how money is spent locally to address local climate-related health needs.
Thanks for highlighting another area of inquiry, right, that we as a community can pursue. And I think at this juncture, it will be great to hear from you. And we do have a Slido question. I hope we can show the QR code soon. And this is the question, in addition to what Susannah just offered to us, what specific research questions should the HPSR community pursue to tackle the climate crisis? Okay? So please keep your questions coming in, and I will be reading some of the, I guess, most provocative, controversial ones, so we can deliberate on what you are suggesting. But certainly all your suggestions we will keep and collate, and perhaps that will feed into the vision and the agenda that was presented to us a while ago. Community-based innovations. How can we adjust our conferencing travel practices in the era of a changing planet? So I think we need to talk about, the future of HSR. Will there be a ninth, or will there be a ninth 5 years from now? Let's see. Oh my God, now it's so fast. So let me use the laptop or the iPad rather. Role of evidence-based. What are we seeing? Intersectional lens. So what else?
So we don't need research, we need action.
We need more action. And feel free to comment with what you're seeing on the screen. Okay, someone I think just copy-pasted an entire set of bullet points. Very good. So the agenda is done, right?
Yeah. We've started a conversation.
Wow.
This is the democratic participation that we've been talking about. It's amazing.
Okay. So which one do we want to focus on? Digital health, I'm seeing it. Yeah, but that long list, my God, we need the entire conference will be dealing with a lot of these questions that you are raising.
It is gold.
Huh?
It is gold.
Okay. So this is what the entire room is thinking about in terms of, the questions. Okay, and I'm seeing a dancing lady emoticon also. Don't worry, we have time for dancing, I think, during the conference. Okay. Interesting. Move from...
Give it a minute.
Yes. And Slido needs to go off screen. That's a signal. Okay, maybe we can pause for a while. Oh my God. I was not prepared for what's happening now. Usually I'm prepared for my moderation roles. But, there's one point that was done. Okay. But I still have access to your questions, so I can go back to some of them. There's one question about, moving away from conventional or the more dominant economic models, right? And I think that's one critique towards some of us in the health systems research community, health policy community. We do health economics, we fix the health financing of nations. But when it comes to challenging and interrogating the global political economy that created the climate crisis in the first place, we are not yet involved very much in that discussion. There are new ideas, the donut economy, the well-being economy of Scotland and others. We're not there yet. So where is HPSR? Where should we go, right? And how we should be engaged in that broader, discussion around and even tackling, colonialism, right? And how it contributed to the climate emergency. Some scholars describe the climate crisis as a form of atmospheric colonization. And on the other hand, the same colonial and capitalist systems that created, many inequities worldwide also drove, the climate crisis. Any comments on that? And this is open to all three of you.
I think one of the things that's really exciting and unique about this conference is its mix of attendees. It's not just academics, it's policy people, it's donors, it's third sector, it's activists. And that has a very rich mix. And so I think if we, and there's usually, you know, a really good vibe at these conferences where people do interact, but it's following through after that. So if we can make some really concrete connections and allegiances, if you like, here to act, researchers can feed through evidence that matters, but they're not the right ones necessarily to be taking that. It's the advocates and to take that perhaps to policy folk and the people from the policy sphere to take those up and to engage and say, we need evidence on this, can you provide it? Yeah, I'll stop there and I'll come in again in a moment.
Any additional comments?
I mean, the rate at which we were getting questions convinced me that there is a lot of interest and participation, and we've begun that process, in fact, operationalized it, so that was great. So not really being overwhelmed by it, but at the same time, when we are addressing the root causes, we're addressing the social and economic model that has perpetuated this crisis, that is also backing the colonial practices and capitalist practices, is the extractive, exploitative fossil fuel economy. So when we are talking about addressing the costs and talking about a just transition and a transformation, we're talking about a society-wide transformation. So I would rather say that it's not that, yes, we are not there yet, but the conversations have begun.
Yep.
And this is our opportunity to shape that conversation and ensure that the past mistakes are not repeated when we are designing this future, this shared future and present that we aspire to have. And that's the addressing the root causes of this crisis is also addressing the root causes of the extractive policies in the colonial past.
Brilliant. Helen, do you have anything to add?
Well, what I would add is that health is inherently political. Climate action is inherently political. And so to get issues of concern to this community addressed, you know, you can't stand aloof from engagement with that. I also think it's a little too easy just to say that, you know, the climate crisis has been caused by, quote, capitalism, and with the implication that we have to get rid of that in order to make any headway on action. Yes, traditional economic models and traditional forms of energy have got us where we are today, but we are capable of transforming. And you look at economies, you know, like the Danish one, you clearly a market economy with and traditionally has had, you know, quite an advanced social security model. But economies like this really looking at how they can decarbonize, how they can depend, more on non-fossil fuel energy. So I think we need to take inspiration from the things that countries and communities are now doing, because if we think we have to change entire economic models in order to act, we don't have time for that, right? Time is running out. I said in my statement that already in the year to January 2024, 2023, that the 1.5 degree limit was breached. Now, the climate change people tell us that to consider a sort of ongoing breach, it would need to be an average of what's happening over the next decade. But with the low level of climate action now, there's no reason why we wouldn't pass it within a decade, that every year is over that 1.5 degree threshold. So, we have the knowledge, we have the technologies, we have the innovation to get effective climate action. And I think the more we focus on the action and how we bring communities and policymakers with us, the sooner we will see some results. And I'm making these comments against the background of what I consider a quite disastrous election in the United States of America, which just elected people who don't believe in anything that we're saying here today. So if there's a rallying cry, it's to get back with messages that are comprehensible to the lay public about why things have to change. Back to you, Renzo.
Yep, thank you, Helen. We kind of touch only the tip of the iceberg, and that's the only time we've got. Although with the warming planet, we might see less icebergs moving forward because they're rapidly melting. And I hope that this session made us realize the urgency of the challenge that we are facing. And we have lots of questions, thanks to all of you, and probably thanks partly to ChatGPT, if you've used those new technologies. But I hope that moving forward and throughout this entire conference, we will demonstrate the same level of energy, imagination, and even a bit of unruliness and rebelliousness that we have just demonstrated in our Slido conversation today. So thank you, Helen, thank you, Shweta, thank you, Susannah, and thanks to you all. I think we will go down.
Thank you, Renzo. And I think that we all know that someone wants to drink now. So I think that I limit my closing remarks within 1 minute, and it's so difficult. But anyways, every presentation and the following discussion has been very rich. So I think that everyone may have a different message to take home. But I think that from my point of view, as already Renzo mentioned, urgency is a very important point. And we need to not only stay in the knowledge generation, but we need to connect the knowledge to the action. So that's a very important point. And also we need a transition, not an incremental change, but we need transition, but we need to do it very wise way. So that's one task that posed for all the communities. And finally, importance of research evidence is also very important. And at the same time, we need action. So this is a very tough task, I'm sure, but we can, as we are encouraged to do that, that we can go for it. And I think that this session opens a way to discuss and move to the action in the next 3 days. Okay, so finally, I would like to ask all of you to join me to give them a big hand. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you all the speakers and the moderators. So I will close this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. That was so fun.
Thank you.
Oh my God. That's a good sign.
Sorry, that wasn't just the end. That was the end of the talking bit. There is some entertainment that's going to happen in a few minutes. So if everyone's happy to take their seats for a very short awards presentation and then some entertainment.
Great, good job. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Sorry if we went over time, but thank you so much for sharing it.
Yeah, can you put it on?
Thanks so much. Yeah, great.
Well, can you ask them? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Is it on? Is the microphone on?
That's right, I think there are enough seats.
So where do I put it on? Oh, I think they're switching from the other side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I be heard? Colleagues. Hello, everyone. Okay. I think there have been slight miscommunication, so apologies for that. We still have 2 more parts to go before the drinks. So I'm really sorry we are running a little bit late, but hopefully we will go through the next 2 parts at a good pace, and we will have sufficient time for the welcome reception. Okay? So please don't go away. Okay. So, good evening, everybody. My name is Tolip Mirzoev. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of the Health Systems Global, and I have a privilege and pleasure to introduce the Societal Awards ceremony. This would be one of the 2 parts that we need to go through before the welcome reception. So the Societal Awards are presented by the Health Systems Global in close partnership with Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research in recognition of professional high standards of professional performance and contributions of individuals or organizations to the field of health policy and systems research and health systems strengthening. The individuals to receive these awards, they will need to be nominated, and then the panel of judges assembled jointly by the Health Systems Global and the Alliance usually convenes, and then they make their final decisions. So can I welcome to the stage our judges, please. So Professor Adnan Haider, the chair of the HSG board, Dr. Rumana Haq, the Health Systems Research advisor and member of the Secretariat, Dr. Kumanan Resenathan, Executive Director of the Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research, and Dr. Janet Vega, Vice Chair of the Alliance Board and Senior Advisor to the Government of Chile. So we have 3 awards to present, so hopefully it will not take a huge amount of time. So the first award is a Young Professional Award. So it is presented to an individual in recognition of their outstanding promotion of the HPSR, knowledge generation and or advocacy. And it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Dr. Zahra Zinali, an Iranian born, please put your hands together. So the award is presented by Dr. Rumana Haq. So Dr. Zinali is Iranian-born physician and advocate for health policy and systems research. She's a member of the HSG Emerging Voices for Global Health Governance Board. She is very well recognized already for impactful research and advocacy on gender equity in health systems. So please put your hands together for Zahra. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored to receive this award and recognition. My heartfelt thanks go to Health Systems Global and the Alliance for this honor. I would also like to express my deep gratitude to my mentors and collaborators, past and present, who have shaped my journey and taught me so much along the way, and my family, who has showed me the joys of academia and supported me unconditionally. To be very brief, this award is particularly meaningful to me because it acknowledges the importance of advancing gender equity in health. It's a privilege to have my work on gender and intersectionality mainstreaming in health systems policy and research recognized. However, as you all know, there's still a long road to ensure that our approach to health systems and policy research is not gender blind. Stark gender-based disparities persist in access to healthcare, in power dynamics around who defines and implements health policies, in the composition of the health and care workforce, and of course in decision-making and leadership in health systems. Neither health nor health systems and policies are gender neutral, so it's imperative that we all take a moment to reflect on the steps that we can take to integrate gender considerations in our work, and in doing so, amplify its impact. Thank you again for this honor.
Thank you. Please stay there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Zinali, and congratulations once again. So our second award is Lifetime Achievement Award. And it is presented to an individual for their, as the name suggests, for their lifetime contributions to the field of health policy and systems research. So can I welcome to the stage our winner, Dr. Abdul Ghaffar. Please put your hands together. So the award is presented jointly by Dr. Janet Vega and Professor Adnan Haider. So please put your hands together. So Dr. Ghaffar is well honored for his lifelong dedication to advancing the health policy and systems research and promoting its integration into health policy. As the former director of the Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research, Dr. Ghaffar shaped the field through groundbreaking initiatives, capacity strengthening for young researchers, and championing evidence-informed policymaking. The floor is yours, please, Dr. Ghaffar.
I think it's always difficult to say thank you, but I think I'm very deeply humbled and profoundly grateful to the judges, to the Health System Global, to the Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research. And I know my last 12 years were at the Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research as the executive director. But I had the first feel of the systems and policy challenges where I was born in a village where there was no electricity and there was very little clean water and the sanitation. Then I went to the medical school and we had to fight with the system and the policies because there was a dictator who was ruling us. But then that helped me to go when I was working at mid to senior level policy positions in the Ministry of Health. That is where I understood how you have to interact with the power, with the policy, and other issues. And that has helped me to grow in the field of health policy and systems research. And one thing I just want to say to all the colleagues who really want to move forward, obviously health system research is important, and we say donation of knowledge, capacity. But we need to have investment in strengthening capacity to engage with policymakers and influence the policy. That's a very different skill, that's a very different mindset, that's a very different appetite. And I think over the last 15, 20 years, Alliance has helped the health policy and system research to move forward. So in the last 30 seconds, I want to acknowledge some entities and colleagues. So as I said, first and foremost, to the colleagues standing here who are the judges, thank you very much. Second, I want to acknowledge the chairs of the Alliance Board who were there, John Arne Rottingen and David Peters, because without their supports, as you know, health policy and system research and alliance within WHO was always a political battle, either within the system or outside the system. So I'm very grateful to their support and the leadership. Obviously, everything happens if you have a supportive family. So I want to say thank you to my lovely wife Lubna, my daughter Kainat, and my son Kehan, who still teaches me how to run the system, either in the house or outside the house. So finally, I just want to say one thing because it's a health system global and Alliance is the one family. So whatever I have done, whatever the recognition, especially in the Alliance, I need to name one person who was the executive director of the health system global at that time, George Gutsatse, because we have such a cordial, positive working relationship. Otherwise, I think that things may not have been at the same place where today Health System Global and the Alliance are working together. But most important, everything I have done was not possible, and it's all credit to my team, still remains my team. It's the Alliance team, most competent, most capable, most hardworking, most dedicated. Thank you, team. And now you are in better hands, in the hands of the Commander Rasanathan. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Anthony. Please tell me. Yeah, thank you. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Please don't forget your certificate as well. Yeah? Yeah?
I will not.
No, congratulations, Dr. Ghaffar, once again. Okay, so our last award is the Societal Award, HSG Alliance Societal Award in the category of some IGE Public Service Award. So it is actually offered to an individual for their outstanding contribution to evidence-informed policy and practice in the field of health policy and systems research. So the award is presented by Dr. Kumanan Rasanathan, and the winner is the person who will receive this is not the winner, I'll explain in a second, but the winner is Keith Clutie. So he is recognized for his exceptional commitment to the public service and improving population health in South Africa. As the current head of Western Cape Department of Health and Wellness, Dr. Clutie has shown outstanding leadership, particularly during the COVID-19 crisis, through his humility, transparency, and evidence-based decision-making. Unfortunately, Dr. Clutie couldn't make it to this conference, so he has nominated his deputy during the break, who kind of explained himself as an operational arm of the Department of Health. So on behalf of Keith Clutie, can I welcome to the stage Dr. Sadiq Karim to come and receive the award on behalf of them. Thank you. Please. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Okay. Fantastic. Brilliant. So we do have a 30-second, or I was told so, a 30-second, maybe 32 seconds, recording from Dr. Clutie. So if our comms team can switch it on, so we will have a word of thanks from the winner. And colleagues can watch on these screens. Yes.
Good day. I accept this award with humility and gratitude. It recognizes the importance of people in the healthcare system, working in partnership with researchers to improve the lives of ordinary people through strengthening the healthcare system. I appreciate this unique ecosystem that has afforded me this opportunity, especially all the meaningful relationships and the exceptional leadership on the part of many. Many that has come before, and surely many that will still come after. I hope this puts a spotlight on the importance of this work and celebrate the wonderful spirit of the people at the southernmost tip of Africa, of which I'm a very proud member. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Please put your hands together one more time for our winners and the judges. Thank you very much. Okay. So at this point, I will hand over to Professor Hiro Aiga for some, this is the last step, I promise. Over to you, please.
Sorry, I want to let you go immediately for drink and food now, but if I'm sure that some of you maybe fall down, some of you might be injured, so I want to avoid the situations. We will take you in a very organized manner, very Japanese manner. So look at right back. The dragon is moving and waiting for you. Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the right back of venue. We are about to present Nagasaki's unique dragon dance, a dynamic traditional performance showcased during the famous Nagasaki Kunchi Festival at Suwa Shrine. The dragon dance began in China as a ceremony to ask for rain and good harvest. The dragon dance was introduced in Nagasaki more than 300 years ago. Over time, it has evolved uniquely within the city, and it has become an important part of Nagasaki culture. Dragon will take you to the food and drink, so just be patient for the time being. It will go around once or twice. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, thank you for inviting us here. We are members of Nagasaki University Jaodori Club. Jaodori means dragon dancing. Please look at the ball leading the dragon. It stands for the sun or the moon. It is believed that when the dragon swallows the ball, dark clouds will form and rain will fall. The dragon is an imaginary creature. It has the wolf's eyes, the lion's mane, the horse's ears, and the eagle's claws. The red and white stripes represent a tornado. Then, please look at the performance Please look at the basic performance of Jaodori, the Tama Oi. In this performance, the dragon chases the ball violently.
It's completely fine. Other people probably recorded it.
But that was you anyway, just to laugh about it. I don't know why. I was very proud of myself. That was it in the game.
Okay. Well, I'm just as soon as the
Take a selfie. Of course. We're older friends than that. It's completely fine. I'll send it to the group.
Today, in our performance, sometimes the dragon will go out of here. Actually, there is a word to call it back. It is motekoi, motekoi. When the dragon runs away during the performance, please call it back. Please. Next performance is Zugura. The dragon is looking around the ball. The dragon is looking around for the ball that is hidden under its body. Now the dragon is searching under its body, but the ball was hidden above the body. Please pay attention to dragon's tail. The movement of the tail expresses the dragon's feelings. The dragon is having a hard time finding the ball and is getting irritated. The quick and rough movement of the tail shows intense annoyance of the dragon.
Thank you. We lost it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please follow the dragon downstairs for a welcome reception. Thank you for being here.
Very much.
One of the many collaborators. Hi. Like this? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh, wonderful. Nice to meet you. Sure, of course. Do you mind taking a picture of us, please? Yes. I don't know when this is going to happen again. Thank you so much. I'll send it to you. Sure, of course. Yes, one night. Thank you.
Picture, so you have to have somebody